The Stoic secret to stop overthinking. Have you ever noticed how your mind refuses to stay quiet? You try to relax. You try to focus on something simple. But instead, your thoughts begin to multiply. One idea leads to another. A small problem suddenly becomes a chain of worries. You replay conversations in your head. You imagine situations that haven't even happened yet. And before you realize it, hours have passed, while your mind was trapped inside its own thoughts. Overthinking feels productive. It feels like you're analyzing, solving, preparing. But the Stoic philosophers understood something most people never realize. Overthinking is not the result of thinking too much. It is the result of thinking in the wrong direction. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, faced enormous pressure every day. He ruled an empire. He dealt with wars, political conflict, betrayal, and uncertainty. Yet in his private writings, he constantly reminded himself of one powerful idea, a secret that allowed him to remain calm even in chaos, a principle that can completely change the way you deal with your thoughts. And once you understand this Stoic secret, something surprising begins to happen. The endless noise in your mind slowly loses its power. Because the Stoics discovered that the key to stopping overthinking is not controlling every thought. It's learning which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones don't. And in this video, we're going to explore the Stoic secret that helped philosophers control their minds for over 2,000 years. But before we go deeper into this idea, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Here we explore powerful lessons from Stoic philosophy that can help you develop a calmer, stronger, and more disciplined mind. Now let's begin with a simple question. Why does the mind overthink in the first place? Why the mind overthinking? To understand the Stoic secret to stopping overthinking, we first need to understand something important about the human mind. Your brain was never designed to make you happy. It was designed to keep you alive. For thousands of years, survival depended on noticing danger as quickly as possible. Our ancestors had to constantly ask questions like, is there a threat nearby? Did I make a mistake? What could go wrong next? This ability to anticipate problems helped humans survive in a dangerous world. But today, the same survival mechanism often works against us. Because the brain continues scanning for threats, even when there are none. A small social interaction becomes something to analyze for hours. A simple decision suddenly feels overwhelming. A minor mistake begins replaying inside the mind again and again. The brain is trying to protect you. But instead of protecting you from real danger, it begins creating imaginary ones. And this is where overthinking begins. The mind jumps into the future. What if something goes wrong? What if people judge me? What if I fail? Then it jumps back to the past. Why did I say that? I should have done something differently. I probably embarrassed myself. So the mind begins traveling endlessly between the past and the future. But the one place it rarely stays is the present moment. And when the mind leaves the present, it becomes very easy for anxiety to grow. Because the past cannot be changed, and the future cannot be fully controlled. The Stoics understood this pattern long before modern psychology existed. They realized that the mind creates most of its own suffering. Not because reality is always terrible, but because the imagination is incredibly powerful. Seneca, one of the most influential Stoic philosophers, once wrote something that perfectly describes this problem. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Think about that for a moment. Most of the things we worry about never actually happen. Yet the mind treats them as if they are real threats. The heart beats faster. The body becomes tense. The thoughts multiply. All because of something that only exists inside the imagination. But the Stoics discovered a powerful way to interrupt this cycle. A mental shift that instantly changes how you deal with thoughts. And once you learn this Stoic secret, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to control every thought that enters your mind. Instead, you begin controlling something far more powerful. Your attention. And that small shift is the beginning of true mental freedom. In the next part, we'll explore the Stoic principle that Marcus Aurelius used to stop the mind from spiraling into endless overthinking. Because once you understand this principle, you may never look at your thoughts the same way again. The Stoic secret. The Stoics believed that one simple misunderstanding is responsible for most mental suffering. People try to control things that were never meant to be controlled. And when those things inevitably move beyond their control, the mind begins to panic. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this problem constantly in his personal journal, which later became known as Meditations. Despite being the emperor of Rome, he often reminded himself of something surprisingly humble: that no matter how powerful a person becomes, most things in life will always remain outside their control. Other people's opinions, unexpected events, the future, even the past. Yet the mind spends an incredible amount of energy worrying about exactly these things. Imagine how much of your thinking is focused on situations you cannot actually change. Maybe you worry about how someone interpreted something you said. Maybe you imagine what could go wrong tomorrow. Maybe you replay a mistake that already happened. The mind treats all of these situations as problems that must be solved. But in reality, they are simply events that must be accepted. This is where the Stoic secret begins. The Stoics divided life into two simple categories: things you can control and things you cannot. At first, this idea sounds almost too simple, but its implications are incredibly powerful. Because the moment you place your attention on something outside your control, your mind automatically becomes unstable. You start imagining outcomes. You start predicting problems. You start fighting a battle that cannot be won. But when your attention moves toward what you can control, the mind immediately becomes calmer. Because there are only a few things that truly belong to you: your choices, your actions, your attitude, your character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this idea again and again. You have power over your mind, not outside events. And once you truly understand that sentence, something inside your thinking begins to shift. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You stop fighting imaginary battles in your head. And instead, you begin focusing your energy on the only battlefield that truly belongs to you: your own mind. This doesn't mean problems disappear. Life will always contain uncertainty. But the Stoics believe that peace comes from knowing where your control actually begins and where it ends. Because once you understand this boundary, overthinking starts to lose its grip. The mind no longer needs to solve everything. It only needs to focus on what truly belongs to you. But understanding this idea is only the first step. The real challenge is learning how to apply it when the mind begins to spiral again. And in the next part, we'll explore a Stoic technique that philosophers use to train their minds to stay calm, even when the imagination starts creating endless problems. Control your attention. Understanding the Stoic principle of control is powerful. But knowing an idea and applying it are two very different things. Because even after learning this philosophy, the mind will still wander. Thoughts will still appear without warning. And sometimes those thoughts will try to pull your attention into the same familiar spiral. The Stoics understood this problem very well. They knew that the mind cannot completely stop thoughts from appearing. But they also knew something far more important. You don't control every thought that enters your mind. But you do control the attention you give to it. Imagine sitting quietly for a moment. Suddenly a thought appears. Maybe it's about something embarrassing that happened earlier, or a situation you're worried about tomorrow. That thought arrives automatically. You didn't invite it. You didn't create it intentionally. But the next step is where the real power lies. You can either feed that thought with attention, or you can simply observe it and let it pass. Marcus Aurelius practiced this mental discipline constantly. Whenever his mind began to drift toward unnecessary worry, he reminded himself of a simple idea: do not disturb yourself by imagining your whole life at once. In other words, the mind often overwhelms itself by trying to process too much. Too many possibilities. Too many problems. Too many imaginary scenarios. But reality almost never requires that level of thinking. Life is experienced one moment at a time, one decision at a time, one action at a time. The Stoics trained themselves to return their attention to the present moment again and again. Not because the present moment is always perfect, but because it is the only place where action is possible. When the mind is trapped in the past, it feels regret. When it is trapped in the future, it feels anxiety. But in the present moment, the mind finds clarity. This is why attention is so important. Where your attention goes, your mental energy follows. If your attention constantly travels toward fear, doubt, and imagined problems, the mind becomes exhausted. But when your attention returns to the present task, the mind begins to settle. This is not a one-time decision. It is a daily practice. Every time a useless worry appears, you gently guide your attention back to what you are doing, back to what you can control, back to the present moment. And over time, something remarkable happens. The thoughts that once controlled your mind begin losing their power. Not because they disappeared completely, but because you stopped giving them the attention they were feeding on. If you're enjoying these lessons from Stoic philosophy and want to continue learning practical ways to build a calmer and stronger mind, consider subscribing to the channel. Each video explores powerful Stoic ideas that can help you develop more discipline, clarity, and inner peace. But even with this understanding, the mind still has one powerful habit that can create endless worry. It constantly tries to predict the future. And in the next part, we'll explore a Stoic practice designed specifically to deal with that problem. A mental exercise that philosophers use to prepare themselves for uncertainty without falling into fear. Stoic practice. Negative visualization. Even after learning to control your attention, the mind still has one powerful habit. It constantly tries to predict the future. And most of the time, it predicts the worst possible outcome. What if I fail? What if something goes wrong? What if everything falls apart? This habit of imagining future problems is one of the main causes of overthinking. The mind tries to prepare itself for uncertainty. But instead of preparing calmly, it creates endless anxiety. The Stoics noticed this tendency long before modern psychology studied it. And rather than trying to suppress these thoughts, they used a surprising strategy. They practiced imagining difficulties on purpose. This practice was called premeditatio malorum. In simple terms, it means the premeditation of challenges. One of the Stoic philosophers who wrote about this idea extensively was Seneca. Seneca was not just a philosopher. He was also one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in ancient Rome. He advised emperors, managed enormous wealth, and lived in a world full of political danger and uncertainty. Yet despite his position, Seneca constantly reminded himself that fortune can change at any moment. Instead of assuming life would always remain comfortable, he practiced imagining situations where things might become difficult. He imagined losing wealth. He imagined facing hardship. He imagined situations where life would become much simpler and less comfortable. At first, this practice may sound pessimistic. But the Stoics did not do this to create fear. They did it to remove fear. Because once the mind calmly considers possible difficulties, those difficulties begin to lose their power. The unknown becomes familiar. And what once seemed terrifying begins to look manageable. Think about how the mind normally reacts to uncertainty. When something unexpected happens, the imagination immediately starts creating extreme scenarios. But when you have already considered the possibility calmly, your reaction becomes very different. Instead of panic, there is preparation. Instead of anxiety, there is acceptance. This practice teaches the mind an important lesson. Even if difficulties appear, you will still be able to face them. And once the mind truly understands that, something interesting begins to happen. The constant need to worry about the future starts fading. Because the mind realizes that most situations are survivable. Most challenges can be handled. And most fears were exaggerated by imagination. This is why the Stoics practiced negative visualization regularly. Not to dwell on problems, but to build mental resilience. to remind themselves that peace does not come from controlling the future. Peace comes from strengthening the mind that faces the future. But even with this practice, there is still one important truth that every Stoic philosopher eventually discovered. The mind often suffers more from imagination than from reality itself. And in the next part, we'll explore one of Seneca's most famous observations about human thinking. A simple insight that explains why overthinking feels so powerful, and how you can finally break free from it. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. Seneca once wrote a sentence that has remained famous for more than 2,000 years. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. At first glance, this statement sounds simple. But if you observe your own thinking for a moment, you may realize how accurate it truly is. Think about the last time you worried about something. Perhaps it was a conversation you were about to have. Maybe it was a decision you were unsure about. Or a situation that felt uncertain. Before the event even happened, the mind probably began creating stories. Stories about what could go wrong. Stories about embarrassment, failure, rejection, or disappointment. The imagination begins building entire scenarios. And as these imagined situations grow more detailed, the body reacts as if they were real. The heart beats faster. The muscles become tense. The mind becomes restless. But here is the strange part. In most cases, none of those imagined disasters actually occur. The conversation turns out normal. The situation resolves itself. The feared outcome never arrives. Yet the mind spent hours suffering over something that only existed in imagination. This is one of the greatest traps of overthinking. The imagination is incredibly powerful. It can create vivid pictures of events that have not happened and may never happen. And because those pictures feel real, the body responds with real stress. The Stoics understood that this process happens automatically. You cannot completely stop the mind from imagining possibilities. But you can learn to recognize when imagination begins exaggerating reality. Marcus Aurelius practiced this awareness constantly. Whenever his mind began creating unnecessary worries, he reminded himself to look at things exactly as they are. Not worse. Not exaggerated. Simply as they are. Because reality is often much simpler than the stories the mind invents. A small mistake is simply a small mistake. An awkward moment is simply a moment. A challenge is simply a challenge. But when imagination gets involved, those simple events become enormous mental problems. The Stoic solution was not to suppress imagination. Instead, they trained themselves to question it. Whenever the mind began producing fearful scenarios, they would ask a simple question. Is this actually happening right now? Most of the time, the answer was no. And that realization alone can instantly weaken the power of overthinking. Because when you return to the present moment, you begin to see that the situation in front of you is usually manageable. It may not be perfect, but it is rarely as catastrophic as the mind predicted. This is why Stoic philosophy constantly brings attention back to the present. The present moment is where reality exists, not the exaggerated future imagined by the mind. And once you begin separating imagination from reality, overthinking starts losing its grip. But philosophy alone is not enough. To truly calm the mind, the Stoics practiced daily habits that strengthened their mental discipline. And in the next part, we'll explore several Stoic habits that can help you gradually break the cycle of overthinking and build a calmer, more focused mind. Stoic habits to stop overthinking. Understanding Stoic philosophy is powerful. But the Stoics never believed philosophy should remain only as an idea. For them, philosophy was something to practice every day. Because the mind does not become calm through knowledge alone. It becomes calm through habits. Over thousands of years, Stoic philosophers developed several simple daily practices that helped them maintain clarity and discipline in their thinking. These habits are surprisingly simple. But when practiced consistently, they can slowly weaken the cycle of overthinking. The first habit is writing your thoughts down. Marcus Aurelius himself practiced this every day. His famous book Meditations was never meant to be published. It was simply his personal journal, a place where he examined his own thoughts. When thoughts stay inside the mind, they often feel chaotic and overwhelming. But once you write them down, something interesting happens. They become clearer, more organized. Sometimes you even realize that a problem that felt enormous inside your head looks much smaller when written on paper. Writing creates distance between you and your thoughts, and that distance allows the mind to calm down. The second habit is taking action quickly. Overthinking grows strongest when the mind is idle. When there is no action, the imagination begins filling the empty space with endless possibilities. But action interrupts this cycle. Even a small action can shift your focus away from worrying. Instead of asking, "What if something goes wrong?" the mind begins focusing on, "What can I do right now?" The Stoics believe that progress always begins with small steps, not perfect plans. The third habit is learning to ignore unnecessary opinions. Many of the thoughts that cause anxiety are connected to how we believe others might judge us. What will they think? What if they don't approve? But the Stoics understood that trying to control other people's opinions is one of the fastest ways to lose peace of mind. Epictetus, another famous Stoic philosopher, taught that other people's judgments belong entirely to them, not to you. Once you stop trying to manage every opinion around you, a huge amount of mental pressure disappears. The fourth habit is accepting uncertainty. Overthinking often comes from the desire to predict and control every possible outcome. But life simply does not work that way. The future will always contain unknowns. The Stoics trained themselves to accept this fact calmly. Instead of demanding certainty, they focused on preparation. If a challenge appeared, they would deal with it when the moment arrived. Until then, there was no reason to suffer in advance. And finally, the fifth habit is training the mind daily. Mental discipline works very much like physical training. You would not expect to build strength by exercising only once. The same is true for the mind. Stoic philosophers constantly reminded themselves of their principles. They reflected on their actions. They examined their reactions. And slowly, over time, their thinking became stronger and more stable. These habits may seem simple, but practiced consistently, they create a powerful shift in how the mind operates. Overthinking begins to lose its influence. Clarity becomes easier to access, and the mind becomes far less reactive to every passing thought. If you enjoy exploring these practical lessons from Stoic philosophy and want to continue strengthening your mindset, consider subscribing to the channel. Here we explore timeless ideas that can help you build discipline, resilience, and inner peace. But even with all these habits, there is one final insight that every Stoic philosopher eventually reaches: a realization about the nature of thoughts themselves. And once you understand this final idea, you may never look at your own thinking the same way again. In the final part of this video, we'll reflect on one of the most powerful Stoic truths about mastering the mind. Final Stoic reflection. Overthinking can feel like a constant battle. A battle between you and your own mind. Thoughts appear without warning. Questions repeat themselves again and again. And sometimes it feels as if the mind refuses to slow down. But the Stoic philosophers understood something important. Your mind is not the enemy. It is simply a tool. And like any tool, it becomes powerful only when you learn how to use it correctly. The Stoics did not try to eliminate thinking. They trained themselves to guide it. They learned to recognize when the mind was drifting toward things that could not be controlled. They practiced returning their attention to the present moment. They questioned the stories created by imagination. And slowly, through daily discipline, they developed a calmer and stronger way of thinking. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that perfectly captures this idea. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. In other words, the life you experience is deeply connected to the way your mind interprets the world. If your thoughts are constantly filled with fear, doubt, and imagined problems, life will begin to feel overwhelming. But when your thinking becomes clearer and more disciplined, life itself begins to feel lighter. Challenges still exist. Uncertainty still exists. But the mind no longer reacts to every situation with anxiety. Instead, it responds with perspective. This is the real Stoic secret to stopping overthinking. Not controlling every thought, but learning which thoughts deserve your attention, and which ones should simply pass by. Because thoughts will always appear, but they only gain power when you hold on to them. The Stoics understood that peace does not come from having a silent mind. Peace comes from having a disciplined one. A mind that knows when to think, and when to let go. If you found this video helpful and want to continue exploring practical Stoic ideas that can strengthen your mindset, consider subscribing to the channel. New videos explore powerful lessons from philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, ideas that can help you develop clarity, resilience, and inner calm. And remember this simple Stoic reminder: you may not control everything that happens in life, but you always have the ability to guide your own mind. And sometimes, that is the greatest power a person can have.